Story 1. In 1998, deep in the countryside of Purana, a family decided to restart their lives in a house far from the city, surrounded by dense vegetation and the tranquility that promised to be the perfect refuge. The property, spacious and boasting old architecture, seemed like a dream. However, that dream would soon become a nightmare they would never forget. From the very first day, Donna Marlene, the mother, felt an inexplicable discomfort. There was something about the house, something she couldn't describe, but it felt as if they were being watched. That night, as she arranged the furniture in the living room, she heard a sound coming from the attic. It sounded like constant scratching, followed by heavy, dragging footsteps. Convinced it was rats, she mentioned it to her husband, Roberto, who promised to investigate. Yet, upon opening the attic door, he found only dust and an oppressive silence. Meanwhile, little Pedro, only 8 years old, began exhibiting strange behavior. Once a cheerful child, he became restless and withdrawn. During the nights, he would wake up screaming, claiming there was a woman with black eyes standing in the corner of his room. Roberto and Marlene dismissed it as nightmares, but the episodes grew increasingly frequent and intense. One night, after one of Pedro's screams, Roberto decided to investigate the attic noises himself. With a flashlight in hand, he climbed the creaking stairs, feeling the cold, heavy air around him. In the darkness, he found an old porcelain doll. Its eyes were cracked but seemed to follow him. The almost human expression on the doll was unsettling. Determined to rid their home of any negative influence, he took the doll to the yard and threw it into the fire. However, as the plastic melted and the porcelain cracked, the sound of screams echoed through the house, as if dozens of voices were crying out for help. Marlene and Pedro ran outside, terrified, while Roberto stood frozen, watching the flames consume the doll. After that incident, the phenomena intensified. Lights flickered incessantly, forming patterns that resembled words in an unknown language. Objects fell from shelves without any wind. Doors slammed with enough force to leave dents in the wood. During the night, laughter and whispers echoed through the hallways, making it impossible for anyone to sleep. On a stormy night, Marlene was awakened by a piercing scream coming from Pedro's room. Rushing to him, she found the boy curled up in the corner, pointing at the wardrobe. He murmured, barely audible, "She's here. She's here." Double quotes overcome with fear. Marlene opened the wardrobe but found only clothes. However, when she tried to close the door, she felt resistance, as if something or someone was holding the handle from the inside. By morning, the family decided they could no longer stay in the house. They left in haste, abandoning all their belongings except for some clothes and documents. The fear of returning to retrieve anything was greater than the value of the possessions they left behind. Years later, other residents attempted to live in the house, but all reported similar experiences. Some claimed to hear voices at night, while others said they saw the shadow of a woman with black eyes in the mirrors. One couple, while trying to renovate the attic, found child-sized handprints on the walls, impossible to erase. It is said that anyone who attempts to live there feels the presence of something malevolent, something that never truly left. Today, the house remains abandoned, its rusted gates overgrown with weeds. The few who dare to approach it claim they hear, even from outside, the muffled sound of screams, as if the walls still hold the echoes of the souls who once suffered there. No one knows for sure what happened in that place, but one thing is certain: the House of Screams is a place where evil lingers, waiting for its next victim. Story 2. In 2010, Joe, an experienced truck driver with over 20 years on the road, was driving alone along a deserted highway in the heart of Mato Grosso do Sul. The night was heavy, and the only sound accompanying the truck's engine was the distant chirping of crickets. The highway seemed endless, winding for miles without any sign of civilization. The dashboard clock read almost midnight, and Joe was mentally preparing himself for the solitude of yet another long journey. Then, as he rounded a curve, he saw something ahead, a man standing by the side of the road, slowly waving his arm. The scene felt almost surreal, as if it didn't belong in that place. The man was thin, dressed in tattered, dusty clothes, and his expression was a mixture of exhaustion and desperation. Joel hesitated. His instincts told him to keep driving, but a pang of guilt stopped him. After all, he knew how unforgiving the roads could be for those without shelter. Sighing, he pulled the truck over and rolled down the window. "Do you need help?" he asked, his voice firm but tinged with suspicion. "I need a ride to the nearest town," the man replied, his voice hoarse and cold. Joel nodded, unlocked the door, and waited as the stranger climbed into the cab. The man carried a scent of damp earth mixed with something sour, something Joel couldn't identify. As the door closed, the truck driver noticed the man's eyes, deep-set, dark, and lifeless, like windows into an abyss. Joel tried to break the tension by striking up a conversation as he returned to the road. "Been traveling for long?" he asked, keeping his eyes on the highway. The man didn't respond. He kept staring out the window, motionless like a statue. The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the constant hum of the engine and the tires on the asphalt. After a few minutes, Joel glanced at the rearview mirror to check on his passenger. His heart nearly stopped when he saw the seat was empty. He slammed on the brakes, causing the truck to skid to a halt on the shoulder. He jumped out, illuminating the area with his phone's flashlight. There was no one. No footprints in the dust. No sounds but the wind. The seat was empty, as if no one had ever been there. Yet the passenger door was still locked from the inside. Joel felt cold sweat trickle down his back. Trying to regain his composure, he climbed back into the truck and sped toward the nearest gas station, determined to leave that road behind as quickly as possible. When he arrived at the station, he parked the truck and entered the convenience store. The attendant, an older man with a weary expression, noticed Joel's unease. "Everything all right, friend?" he asked as he began refueling the truck. Joel shook his head, searching for the right words. "I picked up a man on the road, gave him a ride for a few minutes, but he just vanished." The attendant's face turned pale instantly. He was silent for a moment, as if struggling to decide whether to say something. Then, in a low, trembling voice, he replied, "You saw Joe Azinho. He died on that road 20 years ago. They say he still wanders there, asking for rides. But he never reaches his destination." Joel felt a chill run through his entire body. He tried to laugh, thinking it was just a joke, but the attendant's serious expression said otherwise. 20 years? What do you mean?" "It was an accident," the attendant explained, his eyes fixed on Joel. "Joe Azinho was a truck driver, like you. Lost control of his truck on a curve just down the road. They say he got out to seek help, but no one stopped. Since then, many drivers have reported encounters with him. Always asking for a ride, always disappearing." The weight of the story settled in Joel's chest. He thanked the attendant, but couldn't bear to stay at the station any longer. He climbed back into his truck and drove off, but the old man's words echoed in his mind. That night, the road felt even more desolate and oppressive. The rearview mirror, once a useful tool, now seemed like a trap for his restless eyes. He was afraid to look back and find the man there again, sitting with that hollow gaze. After that day, Joel vowed never to drive that route again. He changed his routes and avoided deserted highways as much as possible, but the memories of that night continued to haunt him. Other truck drivers who passed through the area reported similar experiences, describing a thin man with an empty stare who vanished as suddenly as he appeared. To this day, people say that those who travel that road on the darkest nights might encounter Joe Azinho, the man on the road. Some believe he's still searching for a ride to finally find peace, while others claim his presence is a warning to drivers on that road. Death lurks around every curve, and not everyone escapes it. Story 3. In Rio de Janeiro, perched atop an isolated hill and surrounded by dense trees, there stands an abandoned hospital shrouded in dark and terrifying stories. Opened in the 1940s, it was once one of the city's largest medical centers, known for treating severe cases of disease and trauma. However, in the 1970s, the hospital became infamous for a brutal event, the murder of a young nurse named Laura. Laura worked the night shift, caring for critically ill patients. She was said to be dedicated, kind, and extraordinarily brave, but none of that saved her. On a rainy early morning, a psychiatric patient escaped from the restricted ward. With no one to stop him, he attacked her while she was making her rounds. Laura's body was found hours later in the surgical ward, bearing marks of a cruel end. After her death, strange occurrences began, doors slamming on their own, whispers in empty hallways, and occasional sightings of a figure dressed in white wandering the floors. The hospital was shut down years later, officially due to structural issues, but nearby residents knew the truth. No one could stay in that place for long. Even with the building abandoned, screams echoed through the nights, and inexplicable lights appeared in the windows. In 2015, drawn by the sinister reputation of the site, a group of friends decided to explore the hospital. Mariana, Rafael, Julio, and Beatriz were inseparable, passionate about horror stories, and eager to capture something supernatural on their cameras. Armed with flashlights, cameras, and phones, they entered through the side entrance, where the rusted gate creaked as if issuing a warning. The moment they crossed the main hallway, they felt the air change. It was heavy, cold, and carried a strange smell, a mix of mold and something metallic. The hallways were filled with debris, abandoned wheelchairs, rusty stretchers, broken syringes, and outdated equipment. The walls, once white, were covered in graffiti and dark stains that looked like dried blood. "It's just an old building," Rafael said, trying to sound confident. But no one replied. They were all tense, attuned to every sound. As they explored the first floor, they heard a distant noise, like footsteps. "Must be the wind," Mariana muttered, though her explanation convinced no one. The footsteps were rhythmic, deliberate, as if someone were following them. They decided to keep climbing, ignoring their growing unease. On the second floor, they reached the surgical ward. The main room still held an old iron operating table, stained with what looked like dried blood. Julio pointed his camera at the table, but his hands trembled so much that the image came out blurry. Then they heard the first whisper. It was low, almost imperceptible, but it seemed to say something like, "You shouldn't be here." Mariana spun around, shining her flashlight down the hallway. There was no one there. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice shaking. Everyone nodded, but no one dared to speak. The tension was suffocating. Beatriz, the bravest of the group, stepped into a nearby room and shouted, "Guys, come see this." The others followed and found a room full of mirrors, likely used for delicate medical procedures. However, the mirrors were cracked, reflecting distorted fragments of the room. As they filmed, Mariana let out a scream. In the reflection, they all saw a woman dressed in white, with hollow eyes and a smile that didn't seem human. Terrified, they ran toward the exit, but the doors that had been opened now seemed locked. Rafael tried kicking one of the doors, but it wouldn't budge. The footsteps and whispers grew louder, now coming from all directions. The sound of distorted laughter echoed through the halls, as if something or someone was enjoying their terror. Beatriz began praying softly while Julio yelled, "Please, let us out." Suddenly, a bright light appeared at the end of the hallway, and the silhouette of the woman emerged once more. This time, she was closer, her black eyes fixed on the group. Acting on impulse, Rafael grabbed a metal bar from the floor and tried to confront the figure, but as he approached, she vanished. The sound of doors unlocking echoed through the building. With dawn breaking and sunlight spilling through the entrance, the friends finally managed to escape. They ran without looking back, leaving their cameras and flashlights behind. They only stopped when they reached the safety of a busy street. Days later, they reviewed the footage they managed to recover. In addition to the whispers and footsteps, there was something else. In several frames, the woman's figure appeared watching them from afar, hidden in the shadows. In the final recording, just before the camera fell to the floor, the woman stood in the middle of the hallway, wearing the same haunting smile. The hospital remains closed to this day, but locals swear they can hear screams on the quietest nights. Occasionally, lights flicker in its abandoned hallways, as if the building were still in use. Some believe Laura, the murdered nurse, never left. Others think the evil there is something much older, something that even death cannot erase.